Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Of course, the topic of discussion is going to be cloud workload and infrastructure security trends, most notably as worded as Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, otherwise what all of us fondly call it as CNAPP. It's hosted by Uptycs alongside our special guest, Andras Cser from Forrester. I'm Ganesh Pai. I'm the founder and CEO of Uptycs. I have the good fortune of being your moderator for this exciting and insightful session. We're all acutely aware that the rapidly evolving landscape of cloud native technologies and a lot of digital transmission, which is resulting in a lot of workloads moving to cloud, has created both immense opportunities as well as it's brought a sufficiently unique set of challenges, which of course has created opportunities for various companies, including Uptycs, to be a key player in this area. From securing workloads across hybrid and multi-cloud environments to protecting critical data during runtime, organizations today are facing unprecedented complexity in safeguarding their operations. To discuss these topics, today I'm joined by a panel of industry leaders who are on the forefront of these challenges. We are honored to have Andras Cser, who is Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, who will be sharing key insight into the latest trend and market research on cloud workload security. We're also thrilled to welcome Roland Costea, who's Vice President and CISO of Enterprise Cloud Services at SAP. He brings tremendous amount of expertise in managing enterprise-level cloud security for global organizations, including SAP. He'll be sharing his perspective. Last but not least, I'm thrilled to have Rosa Volger, who's Vice President of Cyber Defense at IBM. And she'll be discussing alongside with the rest of the team how she's built a resilient defense posture in a multi-cloud environment very unique to IBM. Now, throughout the session, our goal is to cover a wide range of topics, including critical importance of securing everything from dev to runtime, the role of deep telemetry and operational controls, which provide the various kinds of risk insights and how organizations can stay ahead of the ever-evolving threats. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over by kicking things off, and let's dive into today's discussion. Andras, if you can do us a favor and kick things off with your presentation, that would be immensely helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ganesh. Yes, appreciate the opportunity to talk today. Definitely a very timely topic. Just want to talk about, some of the drivers, to secure clouds, the stakeholders around the whole CNAPP cloud workload security ecosystem, how it fits into zero trust aspects, how the misconfigurations at various layers impact organizations in a cloud environment. So the biggest challenges, and now in closing, I want to leave with some best practices as well as some of our predictions. So having said this, okay, so these days, right, it's the question is no longer should we move to the cloud. Everybody should move to the cloud because this is a not just a competitive pressure, right? Everybody else is using the cloud, but also is a way to reduce cloud security costs. So we see organizations spending in the case of on-premises workloads, $40 out of $100 total budget, right, just on security. So the cost of security for $100 total budget is $40. So that's really high, and I'd say if you look back at where this number was 10 years ago, this was basically just a really, kind of 10 to 12% kind of number. So it has increased like threefold, just the cost of securing cloud workloads on-prem. So the cloud does help with this because in the cloud, we see organizations just spending somewhere to the tune of 25 to 30% of the total cost of running cloud workloads on security, which is a little bit of savings, right? 25, 30% savings compared to securing workloads on premises, right? So the question is always, how you're able to, secure cloud workloads. And before you're able to migrate workloads from on-prem or private clouds to public clouds, what kind of data protections are needed, what is required right out there. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a bit about drivers to secure infrastructure as service clouds. The biggest challenge, right, that we see out there is almost always regulatory compliance, right? There's a lot of organizations that really are, impacted by PCI DSS, GLBA, and other types of activities. And it's really something that you really have to keep in mind. In fact, 95% of the companies we talk to have some kind of a regulatory vector or input in wanting to secure clouds. Cost savings, as I said, it's about 25 to 30% less expensive to secure a cloud workload than an on-premises workload. Now, obviously, data protection and breach protection always play a big role, right? You definitely want to keep your data safe, secure, and away from hackers, right? And basically have some visibility into the configuration and the data itself. I'll talk more about this later on. Understanding the whole access to the infrastructure as service or cloud infrastructure management console is important. So really, what kind of admin roles there are in AWS, Azure, GCP, or other cloud platforms is two-factor authentication enabled for admin users. How the auditing works for these admin users is very important. Risk profiling workloads also plays a huge role, right? So this means that this is the known unknowns, right? So if you have workloads that may be of higher risk factors, you might be looking at things like, legacy software. You still want to understand the risks associated with those workloads, right? So that is also something we hear quite a bit about customers telling us why would they need cloud workload security or CNAPP. Because they want to understand the risk profiles of workloads, even if they cannot secure those workloads. That's an interesting thing. So understanding, moving from the unknown unknowns to the known unknowns. There's a lot of platform changes. Everything is in flux. With DevOps, infrastructure as code being used, Terraform, Azure Resource Management, Google Deployment Manager, AWS CloudFormation, other types of technologies being used to create workloads, create containerized environments. Everything is in flux, right? This is not your old school data center where you're able to, kind of understand everything in a physical location in a data center. Detecting and preventing misconfigurations. I'll talk more about this, but this is pretty much a huge challenge because most cloud platforms come by default way too lax privileges, right? Anytime you create a compute instance, it's on the internet, accessible from the internet. Anytime you create a storage instance, S3 buckets, Azure blobs, etc., it is typically widely available on the internet, and that's probably not something you want. So understanding the access control rights, the transitive privileges, transitive access levels of storage, as well as the data access patterns to these storage facilities is definitely an important thing. And it's not easy, right? So you cannot really do this on a piece of paper, just kind of really thinking hard on an Excel spreadsheet or a paper envelope or anything like this that most organizations may have been doing in the past. And understanding using identity and access management, the risks and exposure. So which human or machine identity has access to what, and that resource that they have access to, what other resources they have access to is definitely very important. So getting a visibility into all these aspects, being able to check the audit boxes is absolutely important. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the stakeholders, right? So we see obviously IT operations, we see IT security folks, no surprises. We also see cloud ops, cloud security organizations being augmented or basically added to these security roles and operations roles. We also see DevOps, DevSecOps, especially in those situations where IT security has just been like a traditionally mainly compliance-driven function, rubber stampers, right, of configurations, right? In that case, DevOps very often comes in and says, hey, we need to do something better here and secure our workloads. A lot of times we see application developers working off of cloud workload security, CNAPP, as well as compliance, and architectural teams also come into place. So cloud workload security is as analogous and synonymous with CNAPP. So just this is how at Forrester we write about the topic, but for most in most areas, CNAPP is what we call cloud workload security. So on the next slide, I want to talk about why this is important, right? Why cloud security and the whole use of cloud workload security CNAPP tools makes a big role. It is important because these tools are, in essence, your vanguards and safeguards of zero trust in the cloud, right? So if you look at cloud security, right, we have actually a document that I highly recommend looking at zero trust in cloud security. On the data side of things, discovering, prioritizing, encrypting, and preparing for post-quantum computing, right, is definitely, and cryptography is definitely an important element. A lot of cloud platforms, are providing a lot of extensive capabilities to discover data, and the encryption of the data and the tools, mechanisms, and algorithms used in protecting the data, so that you're able to migrate beyond that, right? We also have the key management selection, role-based access control to keys and other encryption artifacts, and protecting non-production environments is absolutely important, right? So this is the data element of data protection. And then basically the fortress structure around the data protection consists of 4 areas: network, workload, people, and devices. Cloud workload security definitely has played in each one of these areas, right? In a network space, understanding the software-defined networking, microsegmentation, virtual environments, remote offices, SSL management is definitely something that cloud workload security can help with. On the workload side of things, definitely looking at things like Linux and Windows operating systems, unusual activity, detecting excessive CPUs, crypto mining, disk use, and really at the container security layer, understanding the orchestration system, the privileges and identities in the orchestration system, like Kubernetes, as well as the workload and container runtime system. On the people side of things, right, all what is in cloud infrastructure entitlement management and cloud security posture management is really very important. This is understanding which admin has access to what, under what circumstances, and how those access rights actually translate to the entire environment. Enforcing multi-factor authentication, passwordless authentication across the whole domain of admin users, cloud admin users, is very important. And devices wise, right, steering traffic, using device posture management, deploy agent-based threat detection on endpoints is important, right? It's probably the least important element here in cloud security, but it's still not negligible to understand how the data moves to endpoint devices as well as servers. So I mentioned configurations, right? So if we go to the next slide, please. On the next slide, definitely, we have to understand that in the cloud, it's there's no physical representation of data center resources, right? It's all infrastructure as code. You have a lot of people, too many people accessing the console, too many cooks in the kitchen. Sometimes you have developers, ops, IT ops, cloud architecture, as well as application developers, or even compliance people accessing the console, AWS, Azure, GCP. So or AWS consoles. The policies that you have are very often just default allowed. Just everything is easy. If you look at the production environment, a lot of times production environments are tightened and kind of secured down, but a lot of times, non-prod environments such as dev, development, staging, quality assurance, and others are a lot more loosely configured in terms of security artifacts. There's too many resources to configure, right? So if you look at a typical cloud environment, you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of resources, and the interplay between these resources is definitely important. Too many policy objects overlaid to define access between resources is definitely an important element here. if on AWS or Azure, GCP, but mainly on AWS, you have a number of different policy types like access control policies, session policies, identity policies, and various other artifacts and policy types that actually define the resulting net access to resources. And then the last point, that there's not too many network policies that are not understood. Maybe they're untested or misconfigured. So basically, it's just a matter of time, unfortunately, before disaster can hit if you're not kind of gaining visibility into these artifacts and configuration objects. So on the next slide, I'm going to tell you where we see cloud workload security playing a role. In essence, in cloud workload security on a CNAPP stack, the blue areas, right, are really the various areas where controls are enforced, right? The green areas, the green boxes, are the areas that are the products that actually help you enforce security in these areas. So the bottom row on the right-hand side, the blue box, is basically infrastructure and software as a service management console and API. So this is your AWS console, and the tools that interact with it and ensure security are cloud security posture management and cloud infrastructure entitlement management or cloud identity governance. So this is understanding configuration drifts, understanding misconfigurations, excessive privileges. If we move up one level, one layer, you have on the right-hand side in the blue box, guest operating systems running on infrastructure as service and other hypervisors. And the controls and the tools that help you protect these guest operating systems are cloud workload protection features. So this can be an agent-based set of tools, like we have an agent that is looking at system calls, file integrities, network access, privilege escalations, malware, ransomware kinds of things, or agentlessly can monitor storage attached to a compute resource. Going one level up to the container blue box, so the third box from the bottom is containers. And in the container space, we see container security solutions that protect, as I said, the orchestrator, the Kubernetes or other orchestrator kinds of engines, right? Understanding privileges of its users and access rights of its users, misconfigurations, login, authentication requirements, and so on, as well as the container runtime types of protections, such as system call monitoring in containers environments, network activity monitoring, container escapement detection, and others. And the top level here is infrastructure as code scanning. So this is basically looking at Terraform, Azure Resource Manager, Google Deployment Manager, AWS CloudFormation, other types of scripts that form your foundational infrastructure as code set of scripts for misconfigurations or weak configurations or drifts in configuration, right? And then IAC's code scanning is the green box, the fifth green box from the bottom up. Okay. If we go to the next slide, right? So one of the biggest data protection challenges in cloud security include things like encrypting data at rest, limiting data access, right? In terms of classification, in terms of encryption, DLP, so data loss prevention, data leak protection kinds of capabilities, understanding what is in a file or in a storage artifact to understand its sensitivity, right? And then understanding the data that is moving in and out of the environment and managing keys, right? So bring your own keys, hold your own keys. Kinds of capabilities are definitely important, and they are challenging to do, right? So all these elements are typically a lot more complex and have a lot more moving parts than what you'd have in an on-premises environment. So some predictions, if we move to the next slide, please. What we see in terms of best practices is integrating cloud workloads with on-prem private cloud environments is very important. So whatever you have in the public cloud is all good, but you will have data paths, data movement patterns between on-prem private cloud environments and the public cloud. You have to monitor those as well. So it's always an end-to-end kind of protection story, never just myopically focused on public clouds. Using an identity zero trust cloud configuration kind of way of thinking, so understanding the users that have access to the policies, and then basically the kinds of users, admin and business users, that have access to compute, storage, and network artifacts transitively, right, in an environment is very important. So you may have a low privileged admin user that has access to a highly privileged compute resource, which has access to a high privilege, high sensitivity data bucket, right? That is something where you see implicit privilege escalations, right, in the environment that can only be understood if you have an identity-centric zero trust cloud configuration framework. Using artificial intelligence for data exfiltration, detection, and interception. So basically recording behavioral patterns as to how data moves. Maybe you have 100 kilobytes of data being moved in and out of an in-house built application in a AWS EC2 bucket, EC2 instance, right, in an S3 bucket. But at some point this number goes from 100 kilobytes a day to tens of gigabytes or terabytes a day. That is typically a sign of excessive data movement that is anomalous and may indicate a threat or an exploit. And then integration with the CI/CD build pipeline. So it is very important to instrument all workloads before they actually go to production, even in non-production environments, right? So it's not hoping that after the cloud workloads have been set up in the cloud and developers started moving data into them, that you're going to be able to retrospectively secure them. But instead, secure the workloads first before allowing developers, DevOps people, and other folks to migrate sensitive data to it. So this is basically our prediction slide. So we see generative AI being used for access anomaly detection. Beyond this, we see generative AI used for policy generation, recommended policies, and as well as remediation script generation, natural language queries and responses in Copilot. So for example, help an investigator or a security response analyst ask things like, which are our top 5 most exposed or riskiest storage resources, and being able to get visual reporting or textual reporting to these questions in natural languages, very similar to how ChatGPT actually works. Crypto agility support, so being able to use cloud workload security CNAPP tools to discover those workloads and encryption mechanisms that may not be quantum safe. So preparing for post-quantum cryptography requires discovery of data assets, discovery of encryption algorithms. That is something where we see cloud workload security CNAPP helping as well. And then infrastructure as code scanning improvements, understanding basically deficiencies in infrastructure as code like Terraform, Ansible, and other types of environments, right, where things are not set up properly or the deployment recipes are not created properly. So Puppet, Chef, Ansible, or Terraform all fall into this category. So we've seen a lot of support breadth here that the vendors started working on. And lastly, on the last slide, there's definitely cloud governance, right? So you have to have a broader picture of all this that it ties into a RACI chart, responsibility, accountabilities, contributions, and who gets informed about what. About who are the internal stakeholders. I've talked about those. Basically, what the tools and the models are that you're using. So the how, the what and where, right? Basically which areas and categories are impacted by cloud governance, and basically where you enforce these. This is a software as a service area, is this cloud infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, private cloud, etc. Okay, so with that, I'd like to conclude my part of today's presentation and hand it over to Ganesh, please.
Andras, thank you. There was a lot to digest. I'm hopeful that between our panelists and yourself, we should be able to cover a little bit more and dive in. But thank you for insightful overview and your perspective. You've had the good fortune of being an industry analyst and have accumulated a wealth of knowledge. So it's sincerely appreciated what you shared. While we wait for Rosa to join, I think a most apt follow-up question out here, and of course, I'll pose it to Roland to begin with, and we can get going. As the threat actors are increasingly targeting with availability tactics, be it as benign as DDoS attacks and other things which impact resiliency and speed in cloud environments, it becomes very critical, especially when it comes to critical infrastructure services, right? What would be useful, Roland, is perhaps if you can give a little bit of your background and kick things off to say, how do you think about resiliency in the cloud and what its implications are, given the scale and the customer base that you're responsible for?
Thanks, Ganesh. So, hi all. My name is Roland Cser. I'm the CISO for Enterprise Cloud Services in SAP. We are running the biggest private cloud in the world today, where we actually offer Rise with SAP is probably the well-known offering out there. That's a business transformation as a service that practically migrates customers from their on-premise environment to a private cloud developed by SAP that is on top of all the three hyperscalers, which is Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. And I'm responsible for the security of the whole cloud. And to your point, Ganesh, I think speed is actually the center of my strategy. And we are processing right now, I think, more than 50 terabytes of data every day. So to understand a bit about the magnitude, with more than 200,000 VMs that are running in the cloud, and probably still doubling that number in the next 1.5 years. And speeds, and I'm talking, with all, in the end, all these big customers are my customers, and I have a lot of CISO to CISO conversations. And in the end, I like to call, security is really it's not objective science. It's a lot of subjectivitism in the air. So the things are really well defined, but how I interpret them, it could be different than how another CISO interprets them. But the only thing that actually gets us all together is when we talk about speed. And for me, that's really critical and important. And when I say speed, it's because we operate under NIST cybersecurity framework. For me, it's speed in the way I identify things, detect, protect, respond, recover, and govern overall. And how we actually manage to get automation into all these processes and even AI today. So just shortly touching base on them, identify for me means to have this unified view, unified security management and visibility across this multi-cloud environment. I'm running AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. I need to actually have this centralized security framework that gives me the ability to look into all the angles left and right in the organization. Now, detect probably are, I would say, two important things. I think one that was covered already, this shift left approach in the DevSecOps integration. So we develop a lot of things. We do a lot of new projects, new services, use a lot of new features from the hyperscalers, the way to actually analyze and discover real-time vulnerabilities or gaps, and even to automate that with to remediate in an automated manner. It's really important. And probably the second piece regarding detection for me is how can we get automation and have AI-driven insights into the detection picture. We implemented a project, I think we started 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, and we're looking how much time we spend in building detections for the whole cloud. And we got into an approach with automation and AI that actually we were able to save 6 times, the amount of time we spent to build detections in a normal, let's say, old CM-based approach in the past, and how we try to do it today with automation and detection engineering. Now, protect me, and I think you covered, Andras, really well around data-centric, I would call, security and privacy controls. How can we enforce preventative controls in the deployment itself? So not allowing a person actually to go there and turn up a virtual machine, but have it scripts that do the deployment automatically with all these preventative controls enabled, so that encryption cannot be disabled. You cannot just open it up to the internet, even if you want to do it. It's actually not allowed. And one other aspect in the protect area for me is I'm running core businesses. Core businesses actually cannot be, no matter the vulnerability management program that you have, cannot be patched with the speed that you patch an endpoint system, a laptop, or even a normal server. So it needs a lot of coordination when you say, oh, I want to patch it 7 days. And of course, yeah, if there's something really critical, but not all the times you can just put down the company that is managing the whole electricity in a big big area out there. It can be US or Middle East or whomever. You need to coordinate that kind of patch or activity. So actually to analyze, I'm vulnerable there is a patch available, how the exploit out there actually works, what's the state of my application, and how can I build a fence that I like to call a virtual fence that protects me against the action, and actually, even if I'm not patched, can give me the right protection to block that specific attack till I get a bit more time to patch the system and to get it back to the green state. And then I would say respond, recover, really important part of the resiliency framework, probably next to the protect. How we look at the backups, how can we make sure that if one system gets impacted, there is no other impact lateral movement on the other system or on the same subscription, or if one subscription gets impacted, how can we make sure that it's not getting to the management plate to the other subscription of another customer? Govern, it's a lot about compliance, and compliance and governance automation, so regulatory standards all over the world. But I think one nice thing that I want to mention, and I end up with that, is we're building right now, we're trying to engineer what we call a unique approach to risk management that comes with technology. So for me, risk is not about quantitative and qualitative. We get a lot of sensors. So we have all these technologies from the endpoint, the sensors from the endpoint, from the network, from the configuration itself, anomaly detection, a lot of things, behavior analytics, user identities. I want to vulnerabilities, state of the application. So I want we're building an algorithm that gets all this sensor into account, that actually creates what we call a risk score of one system, a risk score of one subscription, a risk score of the cloud itself. So it's a 3-layer drill down where I can actually go there and click one button, get a dashboard view of all my environment, and a risk score that gets created by an algorithm that takes into account all these parameters. Click on a customer subscription, get the view of the same algorithm that applies to one customer, click on one system, get the same view that applies to one system by getting all these parameters into account. I put it next to govern, and it's how we build, let's say, the speed of this stack from this framework.
Now, Roland, that is utterly fascinating, and thank you. I know we had a little bit of a logistical challenge, but now we also have Rosa Bolger from IBM who's joined us. She's got purview into very large and significant workloads that she manages. And of course, Rosa, just to cue you in, we had a great presentation by Andras Cser, who outlined the Forrester's point of view based on what he's learned. And of course, the first question that I started off, which Roland was sharing his thoughtful and insightful perspective on, was resiliency, basic resiliency, and how do you account for that when you operate critical infrastructure, especially someone like yourself does this. And he was sharing his perspective, where speed is the most important element, or at least a core element of his strategy. Of course, I'll stop here and would love to hear your thoughts. Of course, we've got lots of questions, but thank you for joining us, Rosa.
Thank you for having me. I want to talk a little bit about the foundations on how to run an effective team that is constantly under pressure and that can deliver, as Roland mentioned, as fast response. So for us, culture is extremely important. One of the biggest problems that we have in cybersecurity is attrition, right? Because you don't get to develop the skills. One of the clients was asking me yesterday, what would you do differently? And I said, one thing, instead of having a very large team, I prefer to have a smaller team that is a lot more skill. And then what you have to be very good at it and get better every single day is on how do you manage and how do you stay calm under pressure? How do you miss perspective? It's very easy to get lost on all the noise of all the false positives. So I concentrate heavily on culture, on keeping the team calm and collected, and keeping perspective. If they lose perspective, most likely they're going to make the wrong call. That's very important to me, that they make the right call. They make it fast, but it also needs to be the right call. And then when it comes to cloud, we have production servers, we have essential services, we have banking industry, we have water services, electricity. How do we do the monitoring without affecting the performance and the availability of the server? And recently we have dealt with issues in that space. How do you recover fast from that? So we talk a lot about active, standby. How do you protect that? Usually my theory is you have to have 150% capacity. You have 2/3 of your capacity in, and you have 1/3 of your capacity out. That's where you patch, you put it back on, you pull another one, you patch, you put it back on. That allows you that if for some reason some of your systems get compromised, you have 1/3 of your capacity ready to go live. That's how I deal with performance availability. Extremely important that cybersecurity can be done without affecting the revenue or the availability of the services. And then the other one is you have to stay extremely connected to the SRE teams and understand that they have to balance providing or deploying their operations at the same time that they have to do security. It's another art of knowing how to connect the two without competing with each other. We're getting really good at it. AI is a place where I'm investing quite a bit of time in both securing the AI as well as using AI for security. So lots of investment on that space. Finally, what I want to point out is in security, we have to move to prevention. This thing of catching the water when it's falling is not the greatest strategy. The strategy is we must concentrate on prevention. Is prevention, is detection, is response. When you remediate, you have to go and see how are you going to change that particular environment, that particular team is not going to repeat the same story. That is fundamental in order to succeed. Otherwise, it is a waterfall and you're not going to be able to catch it all. I spoke a little bit about my strategy or my culture and how do I deal with ensuring that I manage the volume of what is coming. Prevention is critical. So of every crisis or incident, I make sure that we learn and we correct on a permanent basis, not just for those servers that happen, but for the entire infrastructure, for the entire cloud.
Thank you, Rosa. That was very succinct, and I appreciate you outlining how you approach it. Teeing off of prevention definitely is of higher relevance and value than detection, response, and remediation. It would be great to hear your perspective as well as Roland's perspective on, especially with the rapid evolution and packaging of technology. Both IBM and SAP are forefront when it comes to software being the crown jewels of the organization, whether you operationalize it for yourself or on behalf of your customers. It is technology packaged as a product, which is making a meaningful outcome to your customer base is what you've operationalized. And the unit of operationalization in cloud infrastructure today is transitioning from being traditional virtual machine into containerized environments. And these containerized environments, especially as a part of, from build to deploy, come with its own challenges. It would be good to hear some of your perspective, Rosa, first on the scale of container deployments and what does it mean in terms of managing containers environment at scale. And of course, Roland, I'd love to then have your thoughts and see how you guys operate, and would love to have the audience hear your thoughts too. So I'll pause here, and Rosa, let's kick it off.
Okay, very good. When you speak about technology, I want to point out how technology is changing, right? We used to have EDR and then file integrity monitoring and then vulnerability management. And the truth is, the technology is advancing in such a way that now your EDR is also your file integrity monitoring, it's also your vulnerability response. You can use exactly the same technology to accomplish it all. That gives you a very well-rounded picture of where you are. That helps you prevent, that helps you detect, that helps you respond, because I can go and stop processes. I love where we're going technology-wise, that we can wrap it all into one sensor that lives in the system. I love that feature. And then when it comes to containers, well, you usually put your sensor on the node. There is a container that gets compromised, you shut it down, immediately an identical one comes up with exactly the same vulnerabilities because your patch needs to be applied into your node. It's a very different model than with bare metals, right? You have to go and repair the node in order to make sure that the problem doesn't repeat again and again and again. You're just slowing down the adversary by bringing one container down. So on that aspect, we have made great progress in regards to monitoring the file integrity monitoring. That protects a lot our containers. We're using it very successfully for that purpose. And we're also using it to repair when we have a vulnerability, to apply it to the node and be able to deal with all our containers of that node at once. I've been having a very positive experience. Actually, I think it's been easier to do security on containers than it is on isolated servers or bare metals. So that part actually is the easiest part of my job. That's the part that I enjoy the most. Roland, I don't know what is your experience when it comes to containers, but what is your take on that?
Oh, I like containers. Actually, we are not using them that much. I think today we are between 5 and 10%, and we are investing heavily to see how can we, containerize more workloads, more business apps. I think the main challenge that we have is we run too many versions of our applications in the cloud. And it comes with private cloud can be done in two ways. And when we migrate customers, we do brownfield, and which we don't want, but we do it. And we also do greenfield. And greenfield, of course, is the best thing. You merge, you migrate processes and you connect them to clean core. You know what's in there. Brownfield means you just take it as it is, and comes with a lot of versions and a lot of dependencies. And I think the word dependencies is the one that actually kills us to actually be able to analyze. And we are working today to kind of create from what we analyze what can be possible, what we call golden images. It's maybe a nice term, but it's a really difficult term to create. How can we build those so that we know when customer A comes in, can we put it in this buckle and then we know what's in there? Or can we put it in this buckle and again we know what's in there? So I love containers because it makes that thing a bit easier. Okay, something's wrong, destroy, maybe recreate, work again. But it comes, like you said, with those challenges. If I have to put a word that is the most challenging one, I will come back to these dependencies. And it's probably the critical one in security overall. It's not only about the technology, but it's also with, you said about the culture, I think with the teams. Security all the time has dependencies. There's no other team that at least in my perception, that has so many dependencies as security.
I think it's a job. I tell my team that we become adrenaline-driven junkies, right? Because we're always under pressure. But the art, I really think that cybersecurity is almost like an art, because you have to balance so many things and you have to stay cool and collected. Something I wanted to point out, what you were saying about all the dependencies. When we have a 0 day, right? They're going always after the supply chain or the software, the prereq software that all the other softwares need. I love using an EDR to go and query my inventory and identify where is that prereq installed. And I find all the dependencies of that prereq that has a 0 day. I love that we can do that. I love when we know that we have a 0 day that you can work around if you change your configuration. And I can apply actually the configure, and that's why file integrity monitoring is so critical to me. I can actually go and apply the workaround while I receive the patch. I think those are great features.
Roland, teeing off what you just said, when it comes to container environments and the notion of prevention and hygiene, vulnerability management becomes such a crucial part of being preventative upfront and ensuring that your hygiene is good and you tackle things in a meaningful way. But it takes on a different guise and a challenge. And I know that you love strategy and speed. Perhaps you can share with the audience on what your perspectives are when it comes to, whether it's a sport or chess, which has shaped your thinking into as to how you think of vulnerability management at a node level.
Well, I think vulnerability management is, besides dependencies, one of my other challenges. And that's because you can't just do everything as I would want to do it. So if I create a policy that says, we need to patch, let's say, critical vulnerabilities in, I don't know, 7 days, maybe that's a kind of an industry as good SLA, then it's not working all the time. Running mission critical business apps sometimes will not allow you to actually apply that patch. And there are also probably, and when Lisa talked about 0 days, one of the challenges that you scan it in the right way, you identify where it is, and then you realize that in order for you to solve it, you actually can't patch it because there is a dependency that will not work, or there is a custom code that will not work anymore, and you probably need to go to another version or something like that of the software itself. That takes you more time. So I think for me, when I talk about vulnerability management, I all the time want to understand the state of the app. The state of the app can change, maybe not from one day to another, but can change rapidly. And due to different parameters, you can actually go and say, I can create kind of a virtual protection. I definitely want to patch it, but I can't patch it now due to several reasons. How can I go and look how the actors or the exploit would work, and how can it work in my state today, and how can I change that to actually make it not work, even if I'm not applying the patch? So that's the kind of analysis that we are trying to do in mostly in real time. And yeah, it's not easy. We can do things with technology, but from time to time there is also manual work involved there and analysis how it will actually work. And it's a combination of virtual patching and different sort of adversary emulation of how that will actually work on a system basis. I find it really challenging. It's easily when you can just take, you don't even look at what you apply, take all the patches available, apply, deploy to all the systems, done, green, problem solved. When you can't actually do it and there is a dependencies there, or there is a business impact or an analysis that you need to look, not to mention custom codes, that's the approach that we are having today to actually reduce up to, probably there is no such thing, reduce to 0, but actually try to not allow an exploitation to happen by blocking the action.
Oh, thank you, Roland. Andras, I'd love to have the audience get your perspective on what you've been hearing. Of course, I have a ton more questions for Rosa and Roland out here, but you having the benefit of talking to a extremely wide customer base, given where you sit and operate today and the conversations that you have, it would be good to hear, weaving in some of what you heard from Roland and Rosa, to get your perspective on how are you seeing things when it comes to posture management, when it comes to vulnerabilities versus priorities. How are organizations soliciting your feedback? What are you hearing out there?
Typically, it's a data protection centric and led type of question, right? And then the tools are, that we kind of mentioned and talked about, like CSPM, security posture management, as well as infrastructure entitlement, cloud infrastructure entitlement management, and workload protection. So we see a lot of debates around agent-based versus agent-less. Agent-based having the benefit of having a lot more visibility, a lot more kind of direct, real-time view into what's happening. The challenge, obviously, with the agent-based, that it can have interactions. You have to install the agents, maintain the agents, etc. But an agent-less being used really well for things like detecting malware that are a little bit slower changing types of threats out there. So it's a good combination of detection methods. That's one thing I would mention. The whole integrity monitoring, file integrity monitoring that Rose described is definitely an important element here. We're seeing a lot of questions around file integrity monitoring being done agent-lessly as well. So not just agent-based, but also agent-less file integrity monitoring coming down the pike. And then, as with every other security area, right, people are wondering how to reduce the headcount and the manual human labor required for maintaining these types of environments, right, and cloud security, posture management. And, this is always going to have some questions around generative AI, being used in this domains. But, understanding, basic hygiene like malware, ransomware, vulnerabilities, file integrity, privilege escalation, network activity, network traffic monitoring, and the segmentation policies is definitely here to stay, right? This is not something that we expect to go away. There's definitely the cloud detection and response aspect that, like, what happens if you detect something? How do you remediate things? Is this via help desk integration? Is this via automatic remediation? By issuing a Terraform script and running it in the environment to fix the problem. So definitely, just in closing, almost always data protection centric questions that come to my desk here.
That's terrific to hear, Andras. I appreciate you sharing those insights, because a lot of people here want to understand collectively what a broader audience is doing. Of course, we have Rosa and Roland out here who's super specialized, but to hear a broader input that you see was really important. I'm going to shift the conversation and seek a couple of questions of Rosa and the collective audience out here. Andras, I know that you might be coming up on time, but we certainly appreciate your
pleasure. Yes, good time
thank you so much. Yeah, Rosa, it would be great to hear, given the scale that you operate at, where you not only are operating across the entire mammoth IBM infrastructure, but you also have your own cloud. And then, not to mention, given the scale at which you operate, you also deal with the existing hyperscalers, right? How do you get, perspective? I don't want to say method in the madness. I'm sure you have a system worked out, but for the benefit of audience, when you deal with your own cloud and these external clouds and other data center infrastructure, which makes it into a truly giant hybrid cloud infrastructure, which is what IBM promotes to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you unify and get security visibility across these various aspects. It would be tremendous to hear your perspective here, please.
Yes, thank you. It's all about creativity. That's why I keep repeating that it's an art. I was listening about the agent versus agentless, and agent versus agentless. Agent has a lot more capabilities because he's running inside the system. It's going to find things that you couldn't just find when you're scanning ports. Agentless has a gigantic advantage. Agentless tells me what the adversary can see. Because agent-based is going to find a lot of things that the adversary cannot find by just scanning. So what we do within IBM is we do both. We do agent and agentless. The agentless helps me set the priorities, because what is agentless is what the adversary sees. Those are the first things I want to go and close. Whatever was the delta between the two is how the adversary will take advantage to move laterally once that is in, but it's not something that he can see from the outside. So the way I approach this is we have to be very creative, and we cannot lose perspective of all the capabilities that we have. So that everybody says, oh, agentless, useless if you have agent. No, actually it gives you priorities. So use every single tool that you have at hand and be very creative on how do you use them. Prioritization of your work is key. Many people think, okay, let me just close something because something needs to be addressed. No, concentrate on risk, concentrate on your highest risk. Closing something that is low impact is going to distract you from what you really have to address, what is viewed by the adversary. So priority, clarity on the mission, clarity on the perspective at the high level would be my biggest advice.
That's fantastic. Roland, I know that you utilize the hyperscalers probably to the max, I want to say, given the scale at which you operate. How do you get visibility to risks across these hyperscalers, especially when you think of it as a multi-cloud ecosystem? I know that you have, beyond the hyperscalers, your own environment too, but with using the tagline of speed and agility as a basis, how do you combine that with the risk prioritization, and what matters most when you're securing across multi-cloud environments?
I mean, I would say, build a technology set that actually can work on multi-cloud environments. So, and actually do it in the same way. So there are customers that prefer to be deployed in Azure or in AWS or in Google Cloud, and come and ask, why don't you use this feature from Azure or from AWS? And I was like, because there is not an equivalent one that belongs, or that the other hypervisor created. And I can't use it. I mean, I could use it, but I don't want to offer an advantage to left and to right. So I need to actually think in the same way. So I'm building the technology stack so that is independent and give me the same insights, no matter if it's Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. Of course, I can get a bit more speed. So I don't know, I'm giving you an example. Yeah, I have in AWS guard duty. Yeah? It can give me speed by concatenating some insights and sending me back to me instead of me going to every cloud trail out there. That's an advantage, but it's not a dedicated, let's say, advantage versus the others. I need a bit more work to do the same there, left and right. I like what Rosa said regarding agentless and agent-based. I think we also use both of them, and there is, for us, we need to really pick and choose the agent-based ones, because we don't have a lot of capacity. Not that because we can't have it, is that because customers are allowed to intensively use the CPU from the business app perspective, and we can actually have only a really small slot of resources that we can deal with. And then if the agent that sits there is CPU intensive, loads modules into the kernel, etc., it could reach to a moment where it can actually crash. And if it crashes, it actually, stops that specific business of that specific customer. So we are really careful how, pick and choose. We had issues in the past, and we may still have it from time to time, but like pick and choose the right tool sets. Agentless is also nice. I really like agentless. For us, is maybe I'm not that exposed to the exterior, meaning to the internet, but it still brings me a lot of perspective. It can also go with what we call snapshots. I like them. I can like them, I can don't like them, but that's also a possibility. It's not real time. It can give you a view of the system if you analyze it there. But then depending on what the system is doing, yeah, if I have a 32 terabytes HANA database, doing a snapshot of it, it's not really efficient, let's say. So you need to carefully like Rosa said, look into the technology stack and pick and choose the right one and then prioritize in the right way. But building the stack that can work on all the hyperscalers and having the strategy that could be the same no matter where you deploy, even in sub data centers. I think we still have some small things out there. It should be the key.
No, that's fantastic to hear, Roland. Thank you. I'd love to get one strong closing thought from each of you, and I'll lay the basis. Clearly, you've built extremely modern, data-driven security processing pipelines. You want the ability to observe everything, analyze everything, prevent what you can, but more importantly, you want to have rich correlation so that you can contextualize and then do the necessary remediation, detection, remediation, and response. Right? It goes without saying you've invested. Rosa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on your philosophy and approach towards detection and response, and how does that play a key part in your overall, security pipeline that you have?
Understanding the landscape of today. What are the threat actors doing today? Who are the biggest threats because of the software, because the infrastructure, because of the type of clients that I host on our environment? So understanding the landscape, key. Once that you understand the landscape, what signals are you missing? The more signals you have, the more probability you have that you're going to stop or see when the adversary is coming. And can you start seeing some of their tactics before they complete it? Can you see that he's going to start trying? We have succeeded on that. We have succeeded on seeing when the adversary is getting ready to attack us, but it's not there yet. But we have seen the signals that is coming. So we invest a lot on data. I use data to see which acquisitions we want to do, because I use the agent list to scan the entire internet, and I keep it for years so that I can understand the security posture of a company, so that I can understand the security posture of a vendor that I depend on, so that I know how strong or weak is my supply chain. That helps me greatly, because whoever is weak and is a vendor of mine, the adversary knows it also that is a weak vendor. So I know they're going to try to get me that way. Again, it's all about being very strategic and not getting lost on the noise of the day-to-day operations.
Roland, your point of view, how does data-driven approach in a security pipeline help your organization to secure your large customer base?
Just to not repeat anything, I would add one important thing. We process today too much data. And there were some reports there that in average, every company processes more and more, with around 30% more data every year. SAP processes more than 100% every year due to the growth that we had in cloud these days. So for me right now, key is have the right signals and make sure you have the right signals without collecting more. And my team actually has a KPI into how they were able to create efficiencies in less data collection from a source, but with better, or with at least the same, let's say, insights or correlation rule sets capable. Keep data as close to the source as possible. I think that's the future of what we call monitoring, and I like to keep it that way. And apply the intelligence on top of those, if it's a data lake or multiple data lakes or a big data lake or whatever. Try to avoid send data to me approaches of an old SIEM that was, I try to call it as part of the past. So keeping the data close to the source, applying intelligence on that level, and try to use technology to make sure that you correct the right feeds, to get the same TTPs, to get detections versus the right TTPs. Another area that we invest in right now is purple teaming. I like purple somehow. I don't know why. It sounds fancy, but it's more like, how can we actually be sure that the detections works and are efficient, and how can we combine this red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming activities to be all the time prepared with how an attacker would do the things. And we do that not by running a hacking simulation on penetration test with a real scope, but just taking on a regular basis pieces of TTPs and trying to actually do it manually, not with the tool sets that can that require admin access on the system that probably an attacker would not gain, or not that easy. I hope.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Roland. Thank you. Quick note, Uptycs is, of course, a technology provider. For those of you in the audience, we have a very unique telemetry-powered approach. We call it as better security through telemetry. It lays the foundation for getting deep visibility into your workload, both from inside and outside the workload, going along the lines of whether it's agent or agentless. And we have a security pipeline which facilitates the richest possible detection correlations. We are more than happy to have continued conversations on cloud workload protection as well. That's what we specialize in. And Roland and Rosa, thank you so much. And I know we are on top of the hour and it's about time to wrap up out here. Before we wrap for the day, any last comment or closing remark from either of you for the audience? That will be tremendously appreciated. Thank you.
Stay up to date. A lot of times you hear the comment about those ones that know how to use AI. Those are the ones that will always be on demand in the world of cybersecurity. And always look at it from the two perspectives. How do you use it to secure, and how do you secure it? And stay calm. The adversary is trying. I think I always think that the good wins. So I'm just a positive person.
Thank you, Rosa. That's very thoughtful of you. Roland?
I would say stay calm and assume breach is what I would want. I want to leave you with.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you both for your time. I know that Andras had to drop earlier, but this was an amazing conversation, which could not have happened if not for the excellent insights that both of you have brought to the table. And that's a wrap from our side. And thank you to the Uptycs marketing team for organizing this alongside the partnership with Forrester.